Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. At least 10 people are reported killed after Russia launched nearly 270 drones and a missile in its latest waves of strikes across Ukraine, even as Kyiv claims to have intercepted the vast majority. Now, in response, Ukraine is escalating its campaign against Russia's oil infrastructure, hitting tankers and export terminals in both the Black and Baltic Seas. Now, all this comes as Slovakia's Prime Minister, Robert Fico, walks a political tightrope between Kyiv and Moscow. Let's discuss the latest now with our guest, Stefan Korshak, Senior Defense Correspondent at the Kyiv Post. Good to have you back with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Glad to be here.
Let's start with these past days. We've seen renewed strikes by Russia, drone strikes across the country. Tell us the latest impact, the damage, but also what Ukraine is doing to fight back.
Well, it's an ongoing bombardment campaign by Russia that has been in progress for years now. From the Ukrainian perspective, there's a relatively high level of intensity, but it's been worse. There's been some positive news in that the Ukrainians believe that they've been knocking down the very heavy majority of the incoming weapons. They still have difficulties taking on Russian ballistic missiles, but the numbers of those missiles being fired by Russia for whatever reason is falling. And not really in response, but the Ukrainian counter-campaign is definitely, of bombarding Russia, is definitely ramping up. And as you mentioned, there have been strikes by Ukraine hitting Russian energy infrastructure, both in the Baltic and in the Black Seas. And probably the main message on that is that this is far from the first time. These are repeat strikes. These are targets that the Ukrainians have been hitting, in some cases for months. And the damage is accumulating.
Mm-hmm. And also about that strike depth by the Ukrainians, I want to talk about it for a moment, get your sense of it, because we've seen that capability increase going very deep into the Black Sea and to other sovereign Russian territory, if we're looking at Primorsk, for instance. So how much, let's say, are those capabilities gaining, let's say, strength? Is this going to be now consistent? Do they have the capabilities to have this long-lasting? Tell us a bit more about their abilities.
It seems like there is no question that that capability is there and that it is increasing. If you go back, let's say, to late last year and look carefully, you can see that there were either experimental strikes or first attempts, or depends on what you'd like to call it, of long-range attacks by the Ukrainians with singlets, with individual aircraft at very long range or at high-value targets. And the Ukrainians were clearly developing an approach, a strategy in taking on Russia's energy industry. And over time, what has happened is that the Ukrainians have increased in scale. They have certainly made their drones capable of carrying heavier warheads. They've made those drones more resilient to Russian electronic interference. But really the thing that's happened is the Ukrainians have gone systematically after Russian air defense networks for months. And that campaign is now paying off dividends, and the Ukrainians are able to penetrate deeply into Russia. And with the advances that they've had in just moving drones deep into Russia, targets that had been previously not attacked because it was too difficult are now getting attacked. Just, I believe, over the weekend, no, actually it was late last week, the Ukrainians for the first time hit Perm, Russia, which is in the Ural Mountains. It's effectively a 2,000-kilometer flight from probable launch sites, and the refinery is still burning, according to information that I've seen this morning. And one of the reasons that the Ukrainians were able to do that was because at that distance, the Russians appear not to have had any kind of effective air defenses, because they didn't seem to be prepared for a Ukrainian strike at that distance. And that really does seem to be, well, not accelerating, but certainly continuing. And the Ukrainians say that it's going to get bigger and more effective. Mm-hmm. That's what they say.
Yeah, and as you mentioned there, that scale may well continue for the Ukrainians. Also, in terms of how this, let's paint the wider picture as well. We've seen these deeper strikes, but also, now this is coming from the International Study of War. Now, they have apparently said that Russia has now reportedly lost territory. That momentum has stopped in April. I think it was, they're quoting here 116 square kilometers. Tell us a bit how significant this is. It's too early for a turning point. Is this a pause? Tell us militarily what's happening here.
Militarily, it's a turning point, but it's more of a plateau that the Ukrainians have been trying to get to for quite some time, and they've reached it. And it does not mean that the end is anywhere near. The Ukrainians, again, for quite a long time, have taken the approach that in order to contain the Russian attacks, they need to develop a drone-based defense which effectively blankets the battlefield with attack drones and observation and makes it impossible or extremely difficult for any kind of ground attack to move forward. And that has been a question of scale. So it's a density of drones, density of pilots, and the degree to which that operation is interfered with by Russian countermeasures and so on. And you could see small sectors where the Ukrainians had been able to implement an effective defense where the Russians could not advance in small sectors. That actually was happening late last year. And what has happened recently is that the Ukrainians have gotten to the point, let's say, sort of during the latter part of this winter, where that situation was the state of affairs across the entire front. And of course, once they stabilize the lines, their next step, as they have always been saying, is that they will move to recapture territory. And their technique, their tactic, is very small scale, very limited operations with a high probability of success. It's a modern version of combined arms. So there are tanks, there is infantry, there are armored personnel carriers, but it's all covered by drones, and it's all supported by drones. And the attacks that the Ukrainians are making are in concert with the drones. That is, the attacks on the ground. And those are small-scale attacks that the Ukrainians this month, or more, I should say last month, managed to make enough of so that there was a net gain. But in terms of total territory, it's relatively small. And from the big picture, it's what it is it's an effective stalemate where the Ukrainians are capable of taking the initiative from time to time.
Mm-hmm. So let's also move a little bit from the battlefield now as well to the political arena, and actually the capital of Armenia, in Yerevan, the 8th so-called European Political Community Summit. Now, this is drawing together almost 50 leaders, for the first time Canada as well. President Zelenskyy is also there. Tell us, just from your sense, I mean, this came out of the full-scale invasion. Macron put this together back in 2022. Give us your sense of the significance of this gathering, what it means for Ukraine.
Well, for Ukraine, it's just obvious it's a national goal to become a member of the European Union from a political, from a cultural, from an economic point of view. That's the direction the Ukrainians want to go. That's the direction the Ukrainian society is heading. And anything that facilitates that objective, the Ukrainians they'll be in there with both hands and both feet. And they think that this is exactly the kind of event that needs to be taking place, and they'll support it as much as they can. But that being said, they understand that they are currently outside of the European Union, and they understand that negotiations may take place, and there's haggling that takes place before any country is let in. And the Ukrainians understand that they have some, to use the term, cards to play. They have a defense tech sector that the European community needs. And they understand that the process of joining the EU and moving in that direction even is a longer process that's going to require a lot of negotiations. So they see it as an excellent step, but certainly not something that's going to get them into the EU overnight, which, again, is really what they want.
Mm-hmm. And also, speaking of being in and out of the EU, symbolically as well. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico also going to be there on the ground. He's having meetings, directly bilateral meetings with President Zelenskyy. He's also going to be on his way to Moscow soon. Now, he's kind of playing both sides here. So what do you make of him and his influence? I mean, also, if we're looking at the kind of weaponry as well, Slovakia has also provided that arms industry is actually very much needed by Ukraine. So what do you think of his political maneuverings there? Give us your take.
Well, the Ukrainian position on Fico is that, yes, indeed, he's trying to play both sides, but he is not he's not the United States. And so the Ukrainians understand that leverage can be applied on Slovakia. The Ukrainians have demonstrated very clearly that they have the ability to deny Russian crude oil deliveries to Slovakia, although officially the Ukrainians said that that was an accident. But it's clear that the capacity is there. And they also understand that the Slovakian society, the voters, are not as pro-Russia as perhaps Fico positions himself. So, and the Ukrainians are very well informed about their neighbors and the politics that go on in those countries. So it's not as if to say that they think that they can write off Slovakia and Fico and the Slovakian defense industry. That being said, the Ukrainians, they look at the German defense industry as a big potential partner, the French, the British. So Slovakia, they understand, is a player in a game with a great many players. So they look at that as something that needs to be worked through, and there's something that probably can be handled. But that being said, they understand that it's not in their interest that there be any European leader who is close to Moscow. So they'll work to undermine that as much as they can.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to also your sense, back to defense briefly towards the end. Also a meeting between Donald Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, and Zelenskyy. I mean, you mentioned big players for defense for Ukraine, looking to Germany, looking to France. What about Poland? Because, I mean, we've also heard not so long ago, over less than a week or so, about this drone armada that's being planned between, with expertise from Ukraine. Give us the relationship and the defense capability and, let's say, arrangements that can be done between Poland and Ukraine as well.
Well, the potential is unlimited, and I think both sides understand that. However, both sides have real-life, on-the-ground security threats that they have to deal with. If you will, Ukraine is the southern face of what now is effectively an alliance of nations opposed to resist Russian aggression into Europe. And Poland effectively is the northern centerweight. Ukrainians understand that the Poles are building up a very powerful and very capable military. And they understand that the strength of that military is in Ukraine's national interest. They don't see Poland as a competitor. And so where there can be cooperation, they will look for it. But at the end of the day, Ukrainian national security depends first and foremost on a very powerful conventional ground force on Ukrainian territory. Poland's is the same. And so the Ukrainians are not going to look to Poland so much, for instance, for tanks and, let's say, artillery pieces, because they understand that Poland is building up its own military. And the Ukrainians don't really see that as a place where they're going to try and take capacity by buying it or trading for it or whatever. So where the cooperation can happen and both sides are not weakening their own domestic defense, national security, you're going to see that. So you have, and you do see it happening. There's trade, there's cooperation going on in techniques and drone technologies. The Poles have done great work at helping the Ukrainians with artillery and intelligence. But if you look at the scale of the national defense effort, it's really rather small.
All right. So still, but there's still hope there for more and potential nonetheless. Look, thanks for giving us the latest there. From Ukraine there, Stefan Korshak, Senior Defense Correspondent, Kyiv Post. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
And thanks for joining us here on World Talks, but stay right here. There's much more on TVP World. Bye-bye.